Okay, so now moving on to the keynote address of the day, I request P Sainath sir to please take the podium.
I think I'll skip the presentation because I think it's really late now and I need to race before you all go for your dinner. I think the era where we discussed media and journalism in the same breath is long gone. Media and journalism are two different entities. Okay? Journalism is what guys like us do for a living. Media are corporations. They are institutions. They are rent-seeking, profit-seeking institutions. If you analyze them in any other way, you're going to become a cropper. You're going to make a very huge error in trying to analyze them in any other way. Let me give you an idea of what things are happening. On March 31st, Ernst & Young gave us the annual figure they give for the value of the Indian media, financial value of the Indian media. That, by the way, I don't believe that includes all Indian media. It's mostly listed media. Okay? It's mostly the listed media that they cover. And the value on March 31st was 2.3 trillion rupees. That was $28 billion, probably now $27 billion with the rupee falling below 85 rupees for the first time to the dollar. But the value of the major dominant media of this country, and when I speak of media, I'm speaking of dominant media. I'm not speaking of Pari or Indie Journal because we are what we can call independent media. Okay? When I speak of media, I'm speaking of the behemoth that occupies 95% of the space in the media world. Now, $2.3 trillion rupees or $27 billion on March 31st, the very next week, the value went up to $36 billion. $8.5 billion was added by a single man's deal with Disney Hotstar. $8.5 billion Mr. Mukesh Ambani added to the value of the Indian media. Now that $8.5 billion also means that one man now controls about 60% of all streaming in the country. Not television, all streaming, apart from all other forms of media. So one guy controls 50 to 60% of all streaming in India. You know, a lot of you might see ETV Marathi, ETV Punjabi. These are not Enadu TV. These are Mukesh Ambani TV, purchased many years ago from Enadu for the purpose, under a very nice rubric called Independent Media Foundation. Okay, well, they're very independent, right? So, the Disney Hotstar deal brought the total value of the listed or dominant media to $36 billion, of which one individual accounts for 35 to 40% of the value. Yeah. So that's one thing you better think. Second, there's no such thing in the dominant media. There's no such thing as freedom of press. There is freedom of the purse, of your money. What we live under is freedom of the purse, not freedom of the press. You saw the power. Now my point is this. We must, in all the discussion bits that I heard, I completely agree. We must use whatever space we get in those platforms, apart from running our own. We must. If I get a chance to put something onto Times of India, I will. I want to reach their readers. But I have no illusion that I am changing the character of the Times of India. I might be changing the opinions of their readers, but I'm not. Please do not have these illusions that you and I are going to, we are in there for our own reasons and to try and take a better journalism to their readers. We must try reaching their readers. We must try pushing the envelope within. We can, using their platform, wherever it makes sense to, but no illusions. No, they will not. Those media are designed to serve a particular purpose. They are profit-seeking corporations. That's what they're going to do. Occasionally, they might carry an article by Prathamesh or me or anyone else of you. It will not change their fundamental character. Yeah, that can only come with the breaking of monopolies. It can only come but that applies to every other sector also. The pharma sector, however, all those sectors look to the media sector for their ideological protection. We are the hitmen of capitalism. We are the hitmen. We're going to beat up on anyone who tells anything otherwise. Yeah. Did you just consider some of the things that have happened. You had, in 2020 to 2021, you had the largest, peaceful, democratic, constitutional protest in the last 30 years in the world. Did your media ever tell you that was what the Kisan Andolan was? Did the dominant media ever tell you that this Kisan Andolan at the gates of Delhi, where lakhs of people descended, that was the largest protest for justice in 30 years, and the heroism of it, that it was organized at the height of the pandemic. Okay? And 720 farmers died in that. Not just of COVID, they died of hypothermia after being hit with water cannon by the police in freezing Delhi's worst winter in 40 years. Then they had one of the worst summers in 10 years. Then they had an absolutely torrential monsoon period. Yeah. Do you know, before that, everybody has heard of a much more high-profile protest for justice called Occupy Wall Street in 2011 in New York, when a few thousand highly idealistic techies, my heart goes out to them, occupied Zuccotti Park in New York. They occupied Zuccotti Park in New York and held out there. And the owner of the park, it's a private park, the owner, Mr. Zuccotti or whatever his name was sympathetic to these youngsters. He did not ask them to vacate. But the mayor of New York told the NYPD, throw the bastards out. In hours, the few thousand techies and others were thrown out of Zuccotti Park, though they did not have the ill will of the owner. The farmers at Delhi gates stood firm 54 weeks against 9 weeks in Occupy Wall Street. 54 weeks. Yeah? And they moved on their own terms when the 3 farm laws were repealed, which are, of course, being reintroduced by the back door. However, I'm asking you, can any of you show me a major newspaper or a major television channel where there are no editorials in television channel? People tell me there is nothing but editorializing. Can you show me one program or one editorial in any newspaper which supported the Andolan? There they got guys like me to show a token, oh, we are listening, balance, we are listening to both sides. Yeah? Was there one newspaper that told you that? Was there one newspaper? Coming back to Mr. Ambani's power in the media, did you have one editorial in the national press or on television criticizing the obscenity and vulgarity of a $600 million wedding? Can you tell me one editorial which also spoke about that this is the state of Maharashtra where lakhs of weddings collapse in a year because the father is not able to afford the wedding, several hundreds of the farmers' suicides, that has been one of the major causes, that the man is not able to get his daughter married and therefore takes his own life. Very often, in several cases, 6 months later, the daughter also takes her own life, blaming herself for her parents, for her father's, action. And even if she doesn't blame herself, the whole village is there to tell her you are to blame. He did it for you. Yeah. Nothing, not one negative word, not one negative program, not one editorial saying this was a hideous and monstrous thing to do. By the way, I want to tell you this when I say freedom of the purse. My analysis of the Ambani wedding, it was an extremely shrewd business investment. Why do I say that? Mr. Ambani spent $600 million, which is about 0.27% of his personal wealth. 0.27%. Giant companies, giant conglomerates, like Ambani's, Adani's, Birla's, the giant conglomerates, every day their office, where does their money come from? Their money comes from public resources which are leased out or privatized to them. That's where all Indian billionaires, there are $217 billionaires, all these dollar billionaires, where do they get their money from? Oil, natural gas, minerals, forestry, all these are public resources which are leased to them, and sometimes in perpetuity. Mr. Adani has got 79,000 acres of the Hasdeo forest in Chhattisgarh. Now, what it means is that the CEOs of big companies are every day striking some deal in some ministry. Let us say you guys are all secretaries of government, okay? Secretaries of one department or the other. And Mr. Ambani's CEOs, Mr. Adani's CEOs, etc., are all every day coming to you saying, "Arey yaar, let's clear this file and let's go ahead with this deal." Some of you might have some hesitation, thinking this is not a good deal for the public. But after you see the wedding, after you see the entire union cabinet from the Prime Minister downwards attend the wedding, when you see every important person in the A-list of celebritydom, of Bollywood, of Hollywood attend that wedding, when you see every person of power in the country attend that wedding, the next day, when my CEOs come to you, are you going to be able to say no to the deal? If he spent if he spent $600 million on the wedding, be sure that in the next year, the deals struck by his companies will be worth 3 times to 4 times that amount. Be very clear about it. His value, by the way, his personal wealth is worth $118 billion. That is, by the way, many trillions of rupees, okay, 19 trillion rupees or something like that. However, that one individual's wealth is, by the way, 7.5 times your agriculture budget, total agriculture budget. Your $217 billionaires as of December 10, because Forbes does a daily update, the $217 billionaires, their cumulative wealth is $1,041 billion. You know what that is? $1.04 trillion. We are talking $1 trillion here. That kind of concentration of wealth. Do you see the media covering the issue of concentration of wealth? Do you see them telling you that this is not healthy? The gap between what the top 1% in India own and the bottom 50% is far greater as a share of total household wealth than the share of the American 1% of and richest 1% and their bottom. The game. I'll give you one example. When I keep reading Forbes, it's my favorite website. It's an aspirational thing. You keep looking at the list, one day might be your name will be there. Yeah. So Forbes does this. I decided to test the promise of capitalism, which is that if all of us work hard, if we work as hard as Mr. Ambani, and we know how hard he works, if we work as hard as Mr. Ambani, you and I too can be billionaires. Now there are several, even at the level of theorizing, there are problems with this. If everyone who works very hard is a billionaire, every woman in rural India would be a billionaire. And every woman in Africa and Latin America and Asia. Yeah. But since they are not, we know that that premise is a bogus one. So I decided to test the premise by saying how much that is $118 billion is his wealth. His annual income, 4 years ago, he froze the annual income at 15 crores, saying that I'm getting enough by doing this service for everybody. So I decided to see if a common Indian, I won't say common man because it's more often common woman, working on the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme. If I was one of those agricultural laborers who works and my household gets 100 days work, if I have 100 days work, can I also, and I work very hard, can I also amass the wealth that Ambani has? Oh yes, you can. I'm pleased to tell you I found that you can. It'll take you a little time. 350.4 million years. You do the calculation. Of course, if you are more modest in your ambitions and you are willing to settle for his annual income figure, then you can do it much quicker in 5,091 years. Now, consider that the same individual is the biggest owner of media in the country. Yeah. And those sections of the media that he does not own, he is likely the biggest private advertiser. Right? So through the Kisan Andolan, anyone who went to the Singur, to Singhu, to Tikri, to Shahjahanpur, to Ghazipur, every second slogan was naming Ambani, Adani. But you never saw that on TV. Yeah. Is it an accident or is it because of the media power that his corporate power wields? That is something you ought to consider. The media, picking up from the last discussion, it's absolutely true. It's not just any individual caste discrimination or anything like that. The Indian media, the dominant Indian media, are the most exclusionist institution of Indian democracy. Make no mistake about this. And don't think you're going to transform them without breaking monopoly and legislation. You're not going to be able to do it that way or any other way. Just consider, India has had a deputy Prime Minister, Babu Jagjivan Ram, who is a Dalit. This country has had more than, in my count, 40, 50 vice chancellors of universities who are Dalits. Right? You have had more than 40, 30 governors in the country who are Dalits. You have had 10, 12 chief ministers who are Dalits, including Mayawati, who has been chief minister 4 times. You have had 2 presidents of India who are Dalits. K.R. Narayanan, my old vice chancellor, and Ramnath Kovind. You've had so many chief ministers, but you've also had 2 chief justices of India who are Dalits. In which newspaper can you show me a Dalit who is more than chief sub-editor? So only in that they lack merit. They're able to make it anywhere else. But there is no Dalit good enough to occupy leadership positions in the media. That sheer casteism and hypocrisy of the media, embedded and veiled in our projection of a meritocracy, is something that is as in no other institution of democracy. Remember, in the other institutions, there is something called affirmative action. There is something called reservation, and there is protection for someone who is victimized. Most Dalits and Adivasis, as we are learning in the People's Archive of Rural India, are very hesitant and not so keen on going into the media. Because when they are discriminated against, there is nothing they can do. In this country, you cannot, even in Tamil Nadu, you'll be hard put to find a dark-skinned TV anchor. Samjho. If they have a dark-skinned TV anchor, they will paint him white with powder and paint before he goes on air. These are the depths of our prejudices, and the sooner you accept and realize and face up to them, the better you have a chance of doing something about it. Now, also what has happened in the since 1980s is a non-technological convergence. I'll come to the technology bit later. What I call the non-technological look, this media has a 200-year history. 2022, we completed 200 years, which I locate with Raja Ram Mohan Roy's Miratul Akbar, which was in Persian. William Hickey and all that stuff that they teach you in the journalism schools, he was neither Indian, nor did he cover Indian journalism, I'm not even sure that much of what he did was journalism. He was mainly covering the European community around the East India Company and a lot of scandal sheet stuff, who the Governor General's wife was flirting with and other exciting stories like that. Okay, so that's what most of the English language journalists before Raja Ram Mohan Roy is the first owner of a media, Indian owner, and explicitly stating that he was going to give his political opinions, which he also did in Kaumudi Sangbad later. By the way, look at when Raja Ram Mohan Roy wrote a front page editorial about a riot, a peasant who had been beaten to death by the police for a trivial offense where the judge had said he should be given 10 lashes flogging. When he wrote that editorial, starting on the front page, running into inside pages, it had an incredible impact. The district judge of Comilla, that time they called it Camilla, Comilla was summoned to England to appear before the English Supreme Court for what he had done. Then the Governor General cracked down 50 years before the Vernacular Press Act. He brought in a number of acts against the laws against the Indian journalism, against Indian press. How did Raja Ram Mohan Roy react? Tell me if you will find that courage in any of these corporate bosses. He reacted by writing a front page editorial in the Miratul Akbar saying, I am shutting down this paper rather than submit to the derogatory and degenerate circumstances being forced on freedom of the press. That was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. There are 1,000 things on which I do not admire Raja Ram Mohan Roy, which I differ with him entirely. But you have to give him credit for being able to stand up and say that. Now, whatever happens, you do not challenge the government. An individual journalist might, and they find out soon from their bosses what the consequences of those are. But editorially, did you see, move to another issue, COVID-19. Did you see one editorial in this country in a major corporate owned newspaper? They own everything. Challenging the government of India's figures on the number of deaths under COVID-19. Did you? Anyone can tell me what? Did any newspaper say, hey, that's wrong? Do you know how many sources there were worldwide giving different estimates? And I'm not saying all of them were accurate. I believe data never gives you accuracy. Data gives you a trend. It gives you a trend, like in elections and anything else. And it can be a false trend, it can be a real trend. But when 9 global agencies, including 4 which I will name, Lancet, Johns Hopkins, World Development Council, WHO, all of them are saying the death toll in India in COVID-19 is more than 4 million. Lancet said 4.2 million people have died. Lancet is the famous medical journal. I don't necessarily agree with them, but I'm telling you that's the number they give. WHO, to my mind more reliable than Lancet, said 4.7 million people have died. Johns Hopkins University ran 3 lists, as far as I remember, based on different methodologies to show you what it would come. All the 3 figures were above 4 million deaths. World Development Council, DC, Washington, DC, said India has lost 4.9 million citizens in their estimate to COVID. And all these are excess deaths, over and above the normal average number of deaths that a society has annually. In that COVID-19, in the COVID-19 period, these were the estimates coming out. The newspapers would report them. They'd put them there without any comment, without highlighting them, without sometimes not front paging or foregrounding them. And then the government of India gave its estimate, 4,86,000. And the discussion ended. Once the Vishwaguru has spoken, who dares question? Who dares question when the Vishwaguru inaugurates the Ambani Health Foundation and makes the speech that Indians had the power of plastic surgery 20, 30,000 years ago? Otherwise, how do you explain the elephant head of Lord Ganesha? That you knew stem cell and you knew IVF and everything. Otherwise, how do you explain the birth of Lord Karna? Not one scientist sitting there said a word. Nor did any newspaper say that this is not a prime minister. This is someone suffering from serious delusions. So, in any case, first of all, I mean, let me place that in a context. I've noticed that this is the first prime minister who always speaks of himself in the third person. Narendra Modi said, to my mind, there are only three types of people who speak of themselves in third person. One is children, little children. Arjun won't go to school today, right? The other is stand-up comics. But we know that Mr. Modi is anything but a comedian. Even I won't accuse him of that. The third is those who suffer from delusions of grandeur. Those are the people who speak of themselves in the third person invariably. And the media of this country has helped build, generate, sustain the world's largest and costliest personality cult. And by the way, the BJP is going to face the price of that. If that cult falls apart, it's very difficult to build a second one around someone else. Right? You can't do that. Now the entire the same media have not made any protest about the fact that this is the only elected leader in a democracy who has not held a press conference in 10 years. In 10 years he has not, even though he's got the entire media on their knees at his heels, even then they don't want to hold a press conference. Okay? So the convergence that took place over the last 30 years is the media houses, the original newspapers, whether Sakal or Hitwada. Hitwada was founded, one of the founding trustees and board members was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. All these papers, after independence, they were never run for profit and they collapsed financially in the market after independence. They were bought up by families. You know who owns Sakal now. So when you have this one kind of convergence, from 1950s, India had two press commissions, not press councils, press commissions, 1955 and again in 1977-80. The two press commissions said that the greatest problem facing freedom of press in India was business house ownership of the media. Please see both press commissions. See the submissions before. These were not run by radical leftists. They were retired judges of the Supreme Court telling you that. And how much, and in fact, many of the people, though they did not endorse it, person after person making submission before the press commission called for delinking business houses from media, which of course was a dream and an illusion. Now, so one big business houses emerged, which in the 80s became large corporations, not just ordinary business houses. Then comes, from the 80s, though even earlier the trend was there, big time major political families enter the media. The Rajshekar Reddys and by the way, Enadu also served as a vehicle for Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, Sakshi for Mr. Rajshekar Reddy, Sun TV and Murasoli served the individual political families of Tamil Nadu, Jaya TV, PTV and Badals. Okay, so one convergence is happening. Very important business houses have come into media, very important political families have come into media, and very important political families and very important business families are entering business and politics. Today you see how many people who are crorepati sitting in the parliament. In 2004, when we introduced the election affidavit, where you give a self-assessment of your worth, it showed, if we can believe what those guys said, it showed that 32% of all Lok Sabha MPs were crorepattis, 2004. 2009, the figure was 53%. 2014, the figure was 82%. 2019, it was 84, 85%. 2024 elections, it is 88%. 88% of people in. Now, these are the representatives of a country where, ranked 107th in the Global Hunger Index, 178 out of 180 in the Environmental Performance Index, 132 in the Human Development Index, but ranking number 3 in the Forbes Billionaire Index. Okay. Now, that kind of inequality, do you really imagine the media is going to be egalitarian and democratic? No. That's why independent media are needed. That's why they exist. That's why you need to support them. Everyone sitting in this audience I know has complaints about the media. but your complaints are meaningless if you do not put your money where your mouth is and donate and support the EPWs, the Indie Journals, People's Archive of Rural India. If you do not put your money where your mouth is, I don't want to hear your belly aching. Yeah. Then, with this, the other thing about internet, the wonders of the internet are, one, why did a guy like me, a print media junkie, go into digital publishing? Because it's the cheapest thing there is, okay? And because of the trend of readership in the world. However, see one thing, yes, it's true. The internet promises everybody a voice. Internet does not promise that a single ear will listen to you. Okay? It does not promise, it does not guarantee that anyone will listen to that voice unless you are paying. Okay, you can have 85,000 followers on Twitter. What percentage do you think you reach when you put out a post? 2%. Beyond that, you have to do paid posts, promotional posts. These are squatters on global public property. The largest monopolies in the world are the digital monopolies. 4 guys who control what 3, 4 billion, 5 billion people see, hear, read, talk. Okay. Now, also I want to tell you something that we also need to correct our habits. What the chair said about how is technology affecting us? What is it doing to journalism? What is it also doing to reading? A hell of a lot of research has come out. The Oxford Dictionary's word of the year? Brain rot. And its meaning is excessive overconsumption of trivia, non-thinking material, primarily on the internet and social media. And the internet's word of the year is doom scrolling. Endlessly, please sometimes read stuff outside your phone. Okay? The Harvard Medical School, King's College London, Oxford University's public health system, there are a dozen studies which are openly, 3 recent studies, the ones that I named, which are telling you that doom scrolling and endless consumption of trivia, another name for WhatsApp University, has a serious mentally degenerative effect. It harms your memory, it seriously affects your attention span, and it seriously affects your attention span, and it seriously impairs cognitive abilities and faculties. This is the stuff that's coming out from science all around the world, but you're not going to hear the digital monopolies promoting those articles or things. Now, these 4 digital monopolies, by the way, are buying into the existing traditional media or legacy media. Please remember that Jeff Bezos, Amazon owner, is also the owner of Washington Post, and he denied them. He put his foot down when Washington Post wanted to endorse Kamala Harris for presidency. It was so simple. You switch off the tap. That's it. Washington Post won't survive. I own it. I'll shut it down. Right? So you've had the 4. Why do I say in the history of monopoly, there has never been monopoly like the digital monopolies? What makes digital monopolies different from all other monopolies in history? What makes digital monopolies different from all other monopolies in history is that these guys own your personal data. No other monopoly in history owned your personal data. If Prathamesh sends a message to his friend today, I'm thinking of going to Brazil for a holiday, how many pop-ups will you have in your email? We have been algorithmed out of our intellect. We've been algorithmed out of our intellect. Yeah. And the more unequal the society gets, okay, so please, you know what happens? These guys have your credit card data. They have your bank data. They have every damn thing that makes them more lethal than any other. You know, Orwell's big brother was a very small brother compared to what these guys control. Yeah. And we look at them as zones. However, like in all media, there are tiny zones of relative autonomy. That's where we operate. That's where we slip in. But if you're looking at media as a whole, there are today only two schools of journalism. One is journalism and the other is stenography. 95% of what we consume from the media is stenography. And stenography to political and financial power, not stenographers to everybody. You know why I say that? Because I've made this line about journalism is becoming stenography. There are only two schools. One day in Chennai, it had to be Mylapore. An elderly gentleman got up and berated me. He said, "Sir, I have heard you say this 3 times. It is very insulting and demeaning." I said, "Sir, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Who are you, sir?" He said, "I'm a stenographer." He said, "I have been a court stenographer for 38 years before retirement." And he said, "We are much better than you fellows." He had a point. He said, "As a court stenographer, I take down what the judge says, what the witnesses say, what the villain says, what the victim says, what the prosecution says, what the defense says. You fellows only take down what the bloody ministers and MLAs and MPs say and what the big corporate rich people say." I challenge anyone to challenge that statement. You cannot. It is the truth. It is who we are and how we exist. Those of us who practice journalism are moving into narrower, shrinking spaces. If you are not able to fight monopoly, where are you? I go back to the earlier session. You should know that dominant position in the media of the upper caste is not an accident. Thomas Piketty, in the Wealth Inequality Lab report, latest Wealth Inequality Lab report, I told you that 217 Indians, dollar billionaires, own $1,041 billion of wealth. Piketty's study tells us that more than 90% of India's billionaire wealth is entirely in upper caste hands. More than 90% of Indian billionaire wealth is in upper caste hands. Now, if you're not able to challenge that, of course leadership positions will be able, okay. And now those corporates who control those media, who make those appointments, who are they? One of the great understudied, underreported, under-researched areas is the happy marriage of caste and capitalism in this country in the last 100 years. Okay? If you look, take Reliance, take Adani, take Tatas, take Birlas, take anyone. Please see who the controlling shareholders are. They will be from one caste, often from one subcaste, often the majority, the decisive power will be in one gotra. Okay? It's that narrow, the ownership patterns. And that caste-based, that strongly caste-based. So what do you expect otherwise then of that? What do? We continue fighting. You want to lie down and die? I mean, that's your right as well. But I look back at the history of Indian media, out of 200 years, there is 160 years of which every one of us can be legitimately proud. Yeah? The media in your country, the press in your country, was the child of the freedom struggle. Who were your greatest journalists? Gandhi, Ambedkar. Can you ever name two journalists in the world who between them brought out 140, 150 volumes of published collected works? Yeah? They also, each of them started 3 newspapers, three journals. Many of the journals started by freedom fighters failed financially while they were alive and trying to run it, like Ambedkar's Mukanayak and others. Yeah, because they did not have the financial support that some of the journals supported by the Congress party, by the Birlas, by the Bajajs had. Right? But it never deterred them. One journal failed, they started another. Do you know another thing about the heroism of your freedom fighter journalists? H.S. Doreswamy, who died just 2 years ago in Karnataka at age 105. H.S. Doreswamy, socialist, and he started a newspaper to fight the Mysore Maharaja's Diwan, who wanted to keep Mysore out of the Indian Union. The movement was called Mysore Chalo movement. He went, and then when they shut it down, he moved to the neighboring district of Anantapur, Rayalaseema, which is so close to Karnataka. Anantapur is 3.5 hours drive from Bangalore. He moves to the Anantapur. He takes the newspaper title. He registers one newspaper under 6 titles. So that when they shut down the paper, People's Voice, the next day the same paper will appear, same content, People's Choice, People's Vanguard, People's Guardian. Okay? That was the thing. They never stopped fighting. In conclusion, what you have to do, what we have to do in journalism, while the institutional media you fight at the level of legislation, at the level of mass movements, of public action against monopoly, like the farmers did against the agribusiness monopolies. This was the first time in 150 years. The last time Indian farmer directly fought the corporations was against the East India Company. This time they did, first time since independence. We are going to have public action, mass movements, which call for diversity and freedom, diversity in the media, diversity as an antidote to monopoly, anti-monopoly laws which exist in every country in the world, including the United States, though it's a different thing that they're all being dismantled. If we can't do that, that side of it won't work. But in our journalism, as distinct from media, I'm telling you, just tell the stories of the everyday lives of everyday people. That is the motto of the People's Archive of Rural India. Even if while reporting climate change, we report it through the voices and lived experience at those at the front lines of impact of climate change. That's how we report it. Okay, everything, let's go back to the people. They were the ones who defended your press freedom. When Bal Gangadhar Tilak was arrested and jailed for sedition, it was not Bajaj, Godrej, Tatas who came out to protest. It was the textile workers of Mumbai who came out. 16 people were shot dead, another 6 died the subsequent day of injuries. The ordinary people of this country, the ordinary masses, many of them could not read, but they stood up to defend Tilak's freedom of expression. They may not even have agreed with Tilak on 1,000 things, but they stood up to defend his freedom because they realized that all of us swim or sink, speak or silent together. Yeah. So that is what I would say is where we have to be going, and go back to people, a very people-centric journalism, absolutely away from celebrity-centric, Modi-centric journalism, absolutely away from all this, return to journalism of people, by the people, for the people. Thank you.